Emma Frame here, and welcome to Voices of Yoga podcast, co-hosted with Lindsay Porter, where we bring you inspiring yoga stories and insights from yogis and teachers from around the world. These stories highlight the benefits of yoga and encourage those who maybe haven't started yoga yet to get started, and for the more experienced to delve deeper. We hope you enjoy. This is podcast number 128 and video podcast number 2.
Namaste and welcome to today's Voices of Yoga podcast. I'm Lindsay Porter and I'm delighted to have with us today Pema Deki, also known as British-born Emma Slade, a Buddhist nun. Namaste and welcome, Pema.
Thank you.
So just to share with you a little bit about Pema, yoga's been a big part of Pema's life, along with some other significant aspects, and of which have been beautifully captured in her book called Set Free, which was published in 2017. And it's an amazing read if you haven't already come to it. And the book tells of her life-changing journey from investment banking to Buddhism in Bhutan. And today we're going to speak to more about Pema, about her journey. And I would like to invite her to start by sharing with us an outline of your journey into yoga and teaching these practices.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, the book covers most of it. I think that if we talk about it in general terms, the book really travels an arc from outward accomplishment. You know, in the material world, I had a big career in finance, a lot of responsibility, fast-paced life, and all the accessories which come with that. And the book travels an arc from that into a place of internal inquiry, brought on by, quite a traumatic event in Jakarta in 1997 for me. And so it's about the transformation of that trauma. It's about the transformation of that outer engagement into this much more inner inquiry, which did involve a process of healing from trauma and a process of personal inquiry as to what really did matter to me in the end and what really did I want to spend my time doing. And yoga was an essential part of that. It was essential in terms of healing from a trauma and giving me back a sense of trust and joy in the world, joy in being alive in my own body. And it also ended up offering me many insights into, as I say, how I wanted to live my life, yogic values, and what really brought me a feeling of meaning in my own life.
Fabulous. Thank you. And in a way, in your book, and you make it so easy to comprehend about the links between the yoga philosophies, Patanjali sutras, and all these links into Buddhism and the Buddhist nature. And it's like the first time I've sort of read those, that way of linking it. And I just wondered how it was for you to sort of create those linkages.
Yes, I think it's been a fascinating area, and I'm still very interested in this question of how yoga and Buddhism connect and interconnect, because there are so many interconnecting strands. And of course, it's thought that Patanjali's Yoga Sutras was written way after the Buddha. So many yogic scholars will say that Patanjali's Yoga Sutras shows deep influence from Buddhist thinking. And so it's very easy to put these things into clear categories and separate them, but actually there are so many interlinking points here. And so we began today with this word namaste, to recognize and bow down to the goodness or the light in another being, isn't it? Which is very similar to the Buddhist practice of recognizing the essence of Buddha nature in all sentient beings. So there's, just even in that simple way, I just see such a strong connection. And you'll find that meditators in the Himalayas, in Bhutan, which is the country I know best, they will talk about meditators as yogis. they won't talk about them as Buddhists, they'll talk about them as yogis. Milarepa, the great Tibetan meditator, is called a yogi. And so I think it's very clear that it's in terms of the motivation for practice and the forms of practice, yoga and Buddhism have so much in common.
Lovely. And I think often in our kind of modern world, we like to label things quite a lot, don't we? And sometimes I think like this integration, it has always been there. It's just we like to separate things for some reason.
Yes, which is understandable. It's like that question of how you eat an elephant. You eat them slowly in little parts, don't you? It's understandable. And I think that there are differences. We have to recognize that there are differences. I think it's just worth continuing to learn and inquire and study. And I think the more you do that, the more you'll have confidence with being able to both define something and expand the definition of it. Yeah.
Nice. One of the phrases that really stood out for me from reading your book, you talk about this idea of kindism, and I just love that idea.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, in terms of, there'll be a lot of yogis listening, but also other people, just generally lay people, what kind of ways would you recommend we can cultivate this idea of kindism, and how would you describe it?
Yeah, I was very keen on that for a number of reasons, because as somebody who's joined a religious institution, I've really had to think about this transference of wonderful utopian ideas into an institutional form. And I really came to the conclusion that if you follow religious principles and they lead to hurting others, I don't get it. And if you have no religious affiliation, but you're very kind, I get it. So in the end, the question of whether or not your beliefs led to kind actions and speech and kind thoughts in the world, in a way seemed more important to me than just about anything else, whether you called yourself a Buddhist, a yogi, a Christian, an atheist. To me, it was the primary question. And from a Buddhist point of view, we talk about two aspects. We talk about compassion or kindness and wisdom. And I think what occurred in my life was this great surprise at the fact that I was a much kinder person than I had realized. And although I feel very intellectually attracted to questions of wisdom, what is wisdom, the Buddhist notion of emptiness, etc. Actually, in my life, what I have discovered is that I'm a much kinder person than I realized. And it doesn't mean I'm perfect or anything like that, but I felt I was a very intelligent person with not a very huge heart. And so for me personally, to discover that my heart, my capacity to be kind was greater than I'd given myself credit for, was quite a big revelation to me. And as you know, I founded a charity in the end for special needs children in Bhutan. I never thought I'd do that. So for me personally, the reality of kindness has been very revelatory, has been very powerful, and has been something that I've found possible to embody, which embodying wisdom is harder for me anyway. Embodying kindness is easier for me, and I found it incredibly rewarding.
Wonderful. And something we were talking about before we started coming on today to record this podcast was about how some monastics just generally, naturally, very more inward-looking introverted, which is understandable. But then there's this sort of opportunity of monastics to relate to the wider society. And it's something you've been very good at with your book and sharing your story, but also you did a TEDx talk. And I just wondered how you find that ability to relate your teachings to the public.
Yes, and I think it's a very excellent question in terms of the reality of the modern world, which is so interconnected, which of course is the primary meaning of yoga, to be connected, isn't it? And so interconnected, so many forms, social media platforms, instant communication, instant information, etc. So this sense that you can connect to something, you can find out about it, you can just, it's very instantaneous. You can do that. Okay, so in terms of Buddhist teachings and Buddhist practitioners, now we're living in a world where that's the expectation to a certain degree. And I think that especially because I was born in the West, I was born in an inquiring society where you were encouraged to ask questions and consider many points of view. That's part of the educational system in which I was brought up. I think I didn't feel that I could drop that, and that it was necessarily a good thing to drop it. I felt I had to bring that attitude into my monastic life and the way I wanted to contribute in the world. I absolutely rate the importance of quiet time, reflective time, solitary time, inward time. I think it's essential, but I also think that at some point we have to come out of that and help others. And so it's about balancing those two qualities. And I find that particularly on the compassion side, for example, to keep going and not give up with wishing to help others, like wishing to help the children that I help in Bhutan. For me personally, I find that my motivation, that my understanding and my empathy, the qualities of my heart are re-engaged by spending time with those children, understanding what is it they're going through, what's the impact on the family, how does the mum cope, etc., etc. How could maybe I help? I find those practical things are very hard to understand in theory, and I think that to keep going when you don't need to be kind, we don't need to be kind, we make that choice. For me, it's very important to be on the ground in that situation. So particularly for this question of engaged compassion, I think it is important to have that engaged aspect, from time to time. Not all the time, but I think it can be very useful.
Yeah. And something else I wanted to share, because it's opened up a new kind of idea for me as an interest in Buddhism, is the fact that you are also a mother, and yet you're still able to engage in your practice of Buddhism. And I think that's hugely motivational for big audiences out there. So a personal thank you for that. But anything you'd like to share from that perspective as well?
Yeah, one of the most wonderful things about writing the book, actually, to be honest, which I hadn't appreciated, was how many parents, particularly mothers, have wanted to talk to me about that, because I make it very clear in the book that on some level becoming a parent is a huge spiritual time of awakening, freeing them from just thinking about themselves, putting somebody else's needs first, having all those ethical spiritual qualities of patience and perseverance and generosity. They're being really, really tested in the real world once you have this little being to look after. And I found that many parents, particularly mothers, really wanted to talk to me about this sense that in becoming a parent, they weren't abandoning their interest in knowing themselves on every level, particularly a spiritual level, that actually there was a way to think about the way these two worked together. And, one of the things that I found was that a lot of people would kind of come up to me and sort of confess. They'd sort of say, oh, I'd love to still do my yoga or meditation, but, I've got a 3-year-old now and I'm really sorry that it's not happening. And I felt this wish to say, don't be ridiculous. Parenthood is in itself this huge learning ground for who we are and how we want to be in the world. It's this huge expansion of love beyond anything you've probably experienced before you have a child, right? But I found it very interesting that they kind of wanted to confess to me. So I just felt this wish to sort of turn it around and ask them, well, how is being a parent not a spiritual experience? Surely you found yourself hugely expanded on every level with this. And that was interesting in writing the book. Obviously, there are many monastics out there who have had children and then become monastics, or may have been born into a monastic lineage and had children, but those would largely have been men. I think where I'm unusual is that I happen to be in a female body and combine those two things.
Definitely, certainly. So we're running out of time for this podcast, but Pema's kindly agreed that we can come back and do a part 2. Emma, before we leave, I just wonder if you'd like to say a word about where people can find you, where they can look you up, also supporting your charity online.
Oh, that's kind of you. Thank you. Yeah. I love it if people contact me. I do my best to answer everybody quickly and personally. So the charity is called Opening Your Heart to Bhutan, which is Bhutan, if you haven't been there yet. You can find me under my lay name, Emma Slade, just emmaslade.com, I think. And the book, Set Free by Emma Slade, is on Amazon, and you should knock on the doors of your local bookshop as well if you're not so into Amazon. And there'll be email addresses and contact details in those places. So feel free to get in touch, send questions if we're going to do another podcast. It would be lovely. So
that's a great idea. And I wanted just to finish off our time with you today, you could share with us maybe a saying or something that's currently inspiring you on your path and your Buddhist practices.
Yeah. So as a Vajrayana Buddhist, as a Buddhist trained in the Himalayas, we have a Tibetan teacher called Gampopa, very profound Tibetan teacher. And in his book, Jewel Ornament of Liberation, he quotes this saying that the Buddhist practitioner never forsakes any living being. So I encourage you to, in your daily activity, however hard it is, not to wish to push one living being aside into a category of hatred or rejection. I'd encourage you to think to never, in your heart, never forsake any living being.
That's lovely. Pema, every time I'm in your presence, it's always a joy, a spiritual experience, and I love sharing your energy. So a big thank you from me. And
my pleasure.
Yoga. Namaste.
Namaste.
Hi yogis, we hope you enjoyed that podcast with Pema Deki, British-born Emma Slade Buddhist nun, and just listening to her continuing inspiring journey and stories. And I'm delighted to share with you, I've been invited to co-host a special trip to Bhutan in 2020 in support of Pema's charity, Opening Your Heart to Bhutan. It's going to be a beautiful, joyful yoga and meditation retreat and a once-in-a-lifetime trip, weaving in yoga practices, exploring the sacred Buddhist kingdom, landscapes and its cultural monasteries. So I'm going to be doing that alongside yogi Lisa Milner, who's already been to Bhutan several times and supports the work of Pema Deki. It's going to be a really special trip and we'd love you to join us in 2020. It's going to be taking place from the 21st of October until the 3rd of November. The price is going to be in the region of $2,600 and we'd love you to get in contact so we can share more information and details with you and answer your questions. So if you go to Lisa's website, which is shapingclarity.com, you can also email her directly at Lisa, Lisa.Milner, MILNOR @shapingclarity.com. In the meantime, we're looking at setting up a workshop in Edinburgh with Pema, so get in touch with me for more details, yoganuu.com, YOGANUU.com. And it's also worth checking out Emma Slade's website, which is emmaslade.com, as she's hosting lots of amazing events across the UK, so hopefully you'll have a chance to connect with her at some point. Until the next time, yogis, namaste.
Thanks for tuning in to Voices of Yoga, and we hope you feel inspired. You can find more of our free podcasts at www.voicesofyoga.com, and we are on all the main podcast platforms too. We are very open to comments and suggestions, so if you'd like to also leave us a review on iTunes, that would be fantastic. If you would like to know when the most recent podcast is going to be broadcast, You can sign up to our newsletter on the website and we will drop you an email with that recent update. Voices of Yoga is our passion project, and if you like what we're doing and you would like to support us, it would be very much appreciated. And you can do that through a very small donation on our website on the donation button if you feel so inclined. If you would like to collaborate with us in terms of sponsorship, advertising, or even suggest coming on and being a guest, then please drop us an email at voicesofyoga@mail.com. So thanks again, and we look forward to bringing you another inspiring yoga story next week. Namaste.